It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Theo Harvey, MSEE MBA, is the CEO and co founder of SynsorMed, a Google backed digital healthcare company redefining how care is delivered. A former Cisco engineer turned entrepreneur, Theo blends 20 years of technology and leadership experience with a mission to make healthcare smarter, more connected, and more compassionate. He's the author of the Practice Value Creation Pocket Guide and a sought after keynote speaker known for bridging innovation and integrity. Through his talks and consulting work, Theo helps leaders build scalable, human centered systems that thrive in the AI era. So, Theo, first of all, tell me about your education background. So, you're an engineer. What kind of engineer? And was this always the plan from a very young age?
Life is funny, Michael. No, it wasn't. I wanted to be an astronaut when I was little, right? And if you look at
Me
the
too.
data, yeah, I grew up in Florida, and just was really super excited about going to space. I had all the solar systems and all that, and I was like, hey, and I saw Star Wars for the first time when I was like, 9 and 10, and so whatever you learn when you were 10 years old, that just sticks with you for the rest of your life. So I thought I was going to go to space. So I kind of went down that path, and engineering became a natural outgrowth for that. And, my background, going to get my undergrad at Florida A&M, then Georgia Tech, a master's degree. And so I started working with, large engineering companies like Cisco Systems, and
Mhm.
just that was my path, and then started to go into, sales from there. But, oh man, I tell you, in a moment's notice, your life can change. I had my first daughter as I was climbing that corporate ladder. And that's when, innovation and thoughts about starting something new, because my daughter was born and she had an ailment. And, she had an issue with her respiratory.
Mm.
And I was just like, wow. Um, I guess, this changed my whole life, my perspective from that point. I'm sure, Michael, you can attest, right? You had those moments in life where things, you're going one way, and then something happens, a newborn or your life
Yeah.
family member gets sick, and then, your life changed. And so that's for me when
Yeah.
that life of being an engineer, being a salesperson, climbing that corporate ladder changed, because my daughter was born with this ailment, and thinking, how can I change the world for the better once I saw that.
Were you having difficulty getting the health care you felt you needed?
Well, so what happened was, it was just a journey, right? As someone who never really got exposed, I was fairly young, not dealing with a lot with the healthcare system. And it was one of those things where I had to kind of navigate that. And it was difficult because my wife and I, we had to drive. At the time we live in a big city like Atlanta. So it was hard to travel
Yeah.
one side to the other with traffic, then get in the parking lot, then sit in the waiting room just for a 5-minute conversation with the doctor to kind of, help with my daughter's
I
ailment.
absolutely hate that. I absolutely hate that.
And
Just
we've
send me an
all been
email.
there. This is before, like, mind you, before,
Yeah, and
telehealth
they
and
need you
all
to
that.
come in because they have to see you, and when you come in, they don't do anything. They literally just, like, look at you.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, touch your, your chest, put the, set the scope on. It's, oh, you're good, go home. Here,
Yeah.
take this. And so imagine, doing that, pretty much every other week, right? As my daughter, battled from this respiratory illness. And so to me, I was like, something has to change, right? And that's when I knew that, could there be a better way to deliver healthcare at scale to people more conveniently, right? And then so that's
Mm.
kind of was the impetus for that. And you're right, it's just a challenge dealing with those, the healthcare system at that point in time.
So now tell me about SensorMed.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was that where I started that journey of, could we build something that was more connected to patients and doctors, to make them more connected than ever before. And so we built, me and my co-founder, we built SynsorMed on the back of this ideal. And that was, providing tools and technologies like video conferencing, right? At the time, we built this, 15 years ago or so,
Mhm.
wasn't very well known in healthcare, right? Maybe in certain rural areas with these old big black box systems that had like an old traditional telephone and a rotary system that you would call to talk to the doctor if you lived in like rural areas of Alaska. But I wanted to bring that and make that more modern. And so once I kind of went down that path, that's what SensorMed became more of a kind of an app-based solution to connect with patients and doctors, utilizing blood pressure cuff scales. So now the doctor not only could talk to you, but also get vital feedback, right, about your physiological condition. And so that's what's the impetus of SensorMed from that, one incident with my daughter. And spoiler alert, everyone, she's fine. She's 13 years old, doing volleyball, travel volleyball. So she is doing fine. But just
Happy
that
to
showed
hear.
me, yeah, so just that showed me that there had to be a better way of healthcare and creating better connectivity. So other family members like yourself included, right, wouldn't have to do all that traveling, dealing with issues where it could be something that can be taken care of remotely in the comfort of your own home.
Yeah, so what's your one sentence pitch for SensoryMed?
Absolutely, yes. It's connectivity between patients and doctors to make healthcare simpler.
Great, I love it. Now, that was 15 years ago, and I'm sure that was novel to have using technologies like you just and I imagine even if, like, webcams were around back then, there was even, like, um, protocols that doctors had to follow. So I imagine there were some hurdles there getting, like, regulations intact so that that doctors could see patients remotely. But times have changed, and especially in the COVID era where a lot of these bureaucratic structures were pulled down and a lot of this innovative structures were catalyzed into mainstream society. So how is SensorMed what is SensorMed doing to keep its edge in a world where a lot of these companies are doing something similar and are already catching up?
Absolutely. Great question. Obviously, technology is always evolving, right? We tell clients and doctors, you were doing something, a year ago, technology changing, a minute ago, right? And so I think the way we kind of are approaching it is obviously the big buzzword is artificial intelligence, right? Healthcare is unique in that AI by itself, is not going to save healthcare, regardless of what others are telling you about, things that it can do from cancer detection and things like that. Still ways to go because healthcare is so personable. But the way we look at it is using artificial intelligence to create better ways and faster ways for patients and doctors to connect a little easier. The biggest issue that we're faced with now, there's a doctor and nurse shortage. They say by
Mm.
the year 2030, we're going to see a deficit of about 100,000, nurses across the country. So
Oh, wow.
using artificial intelligence, you can start to triage and help patients with some of those what they call lower acuity conditions. So basically, you know, uh, I'm dealing with a code issue or having an issue something simple that you usually see urgent care for, right? A lot of that can be kind of done with AI and systems and sending out automatic medications and notifications that can set that up for patients. So our vision is to create artificial intelligence and it's embedded inside SensorMed in order to make those connections a little bit easier and simpler. So when a nurse is really talking to you, it's for that, really that acute problem that only she can solve, and the
Right.
AI solve the majority of the issues that you're dealing with.
Yeah, you have this, like, really interesting, duality with AI where it's almost akin to malpractice not using it because it really does do a great job at giving you the fundamentals, dealing with a lot of the grunt work, filtering through the noise, and allowing professionals to focus on their unique skill sets rather than do things that can be easily patternized and delegated. That's one hand. On the other hand, it creates that detachment that makes personal care so important. So my question to you is how are you navigating this duality where you're learning how to extract the best from AI? And if you can have some specifics of how AI is just helping the companies and how are you trying to stay true to those fundamental values that make healthcare so important?
Absolutely. I think it's really about, with AI, the coming of AI, you still have to lead with humanity, right? And I think that's so key in the AI world. And so the way we're kind of using it, use cases, for instance, patient that has high blood pressure, being able to kind of have their care plan or how they're kind of help with managing that condition over time using AI to remind that individual, that patient, about the care plan, little things if they're eating too much salty meals that we've been recording and capturing, or they've been not as active. the AI can automatically reach out, remind them of their goals and strategies. For instance, certain patients, as they get older, they have family members and daughters or young ones who are getting married. They want to go to the wedding and be able to walk and enjoy themselves, using the AI to remind them of that long-term vision and goal and connecting them to their why, if you will. I think Simon Sinek said that best.
Yeah.
People only move by their why more than their how, and they'll find the how, right, with the why, with the right why.
Right.
And
Well
so I
said.
think that is, what we're trying to do there from the AI system, right? Kind of making it easier to remind folks around their why. But more importantly, I think balancing healthcare is one of those unique industries where there's always going to have to be human connection. I seriously doubt, in the world of AI, you're going to trust a bot to kind of tell you X, Y, and Z, right? Because there's a human element of sensitive information, about decision making, right? Yes, the statistics say, you should get to surgery and there's a 20% chance that you'll do well or not. But you want that human connection that someone can talk to you and look you in the eye and say, well, doctor, if this was you, what would you do? And
Right.
now the doctors open up their heart and give you an honest and sincere answer about what's the best path as a human to human, as opposed to a doctor patient. And I don't think AI can do that, right? And so I think, when it comes to those personal decisions of life and death, we're still going to need that human connection when it comes to healthcare and the connection of healthcare and AI, if that makes sense.
That made a lot of sense and was a great answer, Theo. So if you had to hypothesize and project, how do you see the next decade playing out for AI in the healthcare industry?
Wow. I mean, it's a lot of funding. If you look at any news story, a lot
Yeah.
of great things are coming down the pipeline. I talk about a lot on my YouTube channel, but one of the things, that we're seeing, is popping up is obviously, better care plans, better connection with patients, doing things like charting more easily. So, what we do now is like record everything. And healthcare is no exception. When a doctor's talking to you, there's this thing called charting. They're writing down their
Yeah.
notes. AI is taking that task on. So now there's a better human to human connection. So I imagine, in the future, right, we'll have absolutely AI assisting doctors with the latest research and information, and also giving them the latest and greatest information to be more personalized to what you need. Healthcare is very personalized, right? That's why we have to get blood work. That's why they always ask you
Mm.
about demographic information, right? So having AI at the palm of your hands, the doctor can give you something pinpoint, specific to your use case, and really probably solve your unique, challenges, right? As opposed to maybe a generic answer. You got a cold, take vitamin C. No, well, you have a cold because you have allergies that are mixed in with other scenarios. So this is what you need to take, right? And that can solve your specific problem. So just think of a ultimate like personalized information for you so that you can have a well-balanced life for the future. And so I think that is, the goal and the opportunity with
Yeah.
AI, right? And that's where we're trying to drive to, right? Because we believe that ultimately, if humans and AI can kind of mirror that together, then ultimately from a healthcare standpoint, we'll all live better lives.
If I were to to make an assumption here, I would imagine the role of AI being an assistant is not one that's going to live very long. It's going to blow right through that role. I mean, we're talking like rates of growth and knowledge that's truly exponential. And, we used to like project outwards in terms of years and decades. And now we're talking in the span of weeks and months at most. So it's really hard to project what would the future be like with AI, but it sounds like what you're describing is it's just going to start chopping away at the role that a doctor plays. It's going to start off as an aide. It's going to deal with the basics. It's going to tell you to do vitamin C. It's going to chart. It's going to start dealing with the grunt work first and foremost. And then it's going to deal with the research papers and giving you just really good speculations and groundwork. And then the doctor will be the person at the very top saying yes or no. And okay, I approve. Right. And then eventually it's just going to be someone pressing a button. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. I mean, it it's a bit of a dystopian view, but like it's a parsimonious one, right? It's like, where in that chain of logic would you say, "Hey, there's a break in reasoning?" Like, it just seems that's the way it's going, and well, the funniest
Right.
thing about AI too is, like, we always thought if we were and I make it sound like we're going back years, but we're not. If we go back, like, even 10 years, a decade, 5 years ago, before the release of the first NLP, which was OpenAI's ChatGPT, and we had to speculate of like, "Hey, how would this play out? Like, how would the first natural language processor play out?" You and I would probably agree that it'll be in this lab, in this confined environment with scientists, and it'd be in literally like a sandbox. Like, and that's a technical term for programmers. Like, this is an environment that you can code in, or that something can exist, and it's got these constraints. And in fact, it's played out the exact opposite. I mean, it was literally thrown into the wild, and all of its feedback and all of its recursive learning is coming from people like you and I. And to add to the peculiarity of the situation, I mean, we thought, stuff like perhaps healthcare and stuff that is like fundamental and scientific could do a great job, or like predicting certain structures for proteins and medications and pharmaceuticals. And it is, but it also played a really interesting role in, like, surprising us, and the things that we thought made us uniquely human are the things that seem to be at threat first and foremost. I mean, it does a great job at AI, with art, it does an incredible job with music, and it does a great job with web development and design and stuff that's just, less STEM-based and more art-based. So, the point I'm trying to make here is that, first of all, it's fascinating. Second of all, it's our predictive power is truly fleeting. And it's just a weird world. I don't really even understand how any of this can make any sense in 10 years from now.
Well, it's so hard to predict, the future. We can probably do it in 1 year, but predict 10 years, no one can really do that. No one is very hard to do that. And so to your point, I think, we all thought AI was going for manual labor first, right? Remember the robots going to take over the warehouse
Yeah.
jobs,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
those
that was
Boston
the thing that we
Dynamics.
had thought about, right? Uh, but it's so funny though, I talked about Star Wars and we're bringing it all back. You remember R2D2, C3PO, if you're a Star Wars
Right.
fans out there, right? They were very what? Agreeable most of the time, right? Trying to
Yeah.
help the humans. And that is what AI has right now. And if you notice, there's a big thing going on with AI psychosis that's unfortunately people are getting kind of wrapped into like agreeable large language models, if you will,
Oh, yeah.
agreeing with
It's
them
so
over
annoying
time.
it's so annoyingly
And
agreeable.
so the challenge with that is that's where the human element can come in, I believe, right? We all know about hallucinations where AIs can probably, say things that are not true. The human element, that the core thinking element, I don't think will ever go away, right? You have to push through that, just like we pushed through again when the new
Right.
invention of television came in, right? So you didn't get distracted by television or
Right.
radio, right? Or any, new technology, social media. There's still going to be an element for humans to come in to
Right.
kind of think above that standard, whether it's,
But we're
being a
making this
doctor as we think it's
assumption.
going to be, whether it's going to be a doctor like we think it's going to be, but I guarantee there will be a different layer of providing healthcare delivery services, right? Using the AI as a tool, just like we use a
Mm,
typewriter, right? Or a computer. They didn't replace our thinking, right? We just elevated to new solutions. Heck, 15 years ago, there wasn't a podcast interviewer, right? Or podcast shows, right? And so now we had those, and that was developed, over the course of the internet and all the different technologies that evolved over that. So I definitely believe there will probably be elevated new job, formats. Maybe it's not really a doctor per se, but maybe there would be someone that's more of an overseer of delivery of new, solutions and technologies, right? For personalized medicine. Maybe
right.
that would be the role. So, to your point, it's very hard to predict, but I guess I still believe in, human beings. We've been on this planet for a while, so
Yeah.
I do feel like there is still a chance that we can figure this out, even quote unquote, with the last invention that we'll ever make with AI.
Yeah, it's a very scary assumption and that we're holding on to, that human intelligence is the golden standard. But, it's possible that standard will be blown right through. So the
Yeah.
the argument that like we'll always be there to guide it would be like, ants are like trying to control gods to some extent. But I mean, and even then we cure all diseases, we fix everything, we don't need to work anymore. Then what's like this world's just going to be an unrecognizably different place in terms of our values and pursuits. And you also like, yeah, you were so right about Star Wars. But what I find interesting is one of the great examples for projecting outwards in like the 60s and 70s were flying cars. They kept talking about flying cars. There's nothing science, there's no it's just an engineering problem. There's no scientific constraints to making flying cars, but there's a convenience and a cultural aspect to it as well. Like it's just we've never evolved to really find any true use in cars. And you're gonna have like cars crashing into your house on the 10th floor of your building. It never manifested, not because the science is not there, just because we just weren't interested in bringing them into market. And like that's like a poor projection of what the future would be like. What fascinates me is it's more of like what we can do. It's a question of engineering, it's a question of science.
Mm.
And if AI can literally test every single permutation for a perfect binding for a protein molecule, so they can speed up testing of drugs by literally like 20x. I mean, that's going to be a radically more interesting world. If we're going to start making hearts that are electronic, that are much better suited to outlive the biological hearts, that's going to be an interesting world. And when we start answering fundamental questions of what makes us us and what's consciousness and like, is this the ideal material to live forever? What does it even mean to live? What does life even mean? Is life subject to carbon, or is it can be different structures of silicon, and it gets really funky? So I think we understand when we answer some fundamental questions. I think that'll give us some sort of idea of where things are going. But I mean, healthcare is the most important thing. Like we've evolved to like see beauty in death, and I think because we were powerless to do anything about it. And I think now we're really a lot more in control, and we're in the driver's seat of our own destiny. And I think you're in the best field you can possibly be in.
Well, no, I agree. I mean, I think this is an exciting time just to be in healthcare and what's the technology that can bring to your point. And you're opening up a lot of cans when it comes to that's a philosophy questions.
Yeah,
Philosophers have kind of debated that for years and kind of figured that out and what it means to be human. I would even argue, do we even understand intelligence enough to even call AI artificial intelligence, right? And so
yeah.
that would be something that we would kind of, uncook. But yeah, I think ultimately,
And it's possible,
go.
by the way, you're spot on. Like AI can keep getting better and better and better, but it doesn't necessarily evolve or translate into this idea of consciousness and being self-aware. And if that's a milestone that's really hard for us to hit or harder than we anticipate, then being human is going to be exceptionally unique. And you're still going to have a doctor at the very top of those echelons making those decisions.
And
It's
these are
anyone's
questions
guess.
we haven't even answered for ourselves, right? And
Yeah, yeah,
so to
yeah.
expect,
And we think it's
basically
100 years
maybe,
ahead, but it's really just
yeah,
it's closer than we think.
to think it's, a large language model is basically a language predictor, right? Like for lack of a better
Yeah,
word, right? So thinking, yes, it's built with all the internet inside of it, but it's really predicting what the next right thing should be to say. So to think that that can kind of come up with consciousness because it's based on past human knowledge, we'll see. It'd be interesting to
yeah,
see. They're making that bet that more data centers and more data can make that a reality. But there's some arguments to be said that that may not happen. So to your point, I kind of err on the side of, hey, we've been here before. This is, we've all been here before. We'll see this again. And so I think the goal would be, as humans, as we try to evolve this, learn about the technologies, be a human that understands the tools, and a lot of doctors we talk to are using SynsorMed and other AI enabled tools so they can do their job better. So when the time comes time to, look at, who can help them, evolve, those are the doctors that are going to be selected more, or those are going to be the nurses, or those are going to be the
right.
technologies that are going to be, at the forefront because they're really kind of utilizing the tools most effectively.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And it's so interesting when you mentioned how we're running into a shortage of healthcare professionals. And you're 100% right that the solution might not necessarily be getting more healthcare professionals. It's just allowing healthcare professionals to do so much more with their limited time.
Yeah.
And I just have one question for you, Theo. So, where would you like to see the healthcare industry moving forward? And like, what are the current bottlenecks that are just really holding you back? Is it like regulatory stuff? And it's all moving so quickly, but just another theoretical question.
Yeah, great question. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Regulation. I mean, it's important in healthcare. because of the human nature. And if we don't get it right, there could be, issues with people getting hurt and harm, right? There's the Hippocratic oath, do no harm, right? And so I think we have to kind of understand how to work with the regulatory systems in order to kind of make sure patients are taken care of. They have things like HIPAA, and
Right.
protection health, patient health information or PHI. So that still has to be very relevant, right? So I think if we want to kind of move regulatory, to the forefront, I think we still have to follow the scientific process and making sure we follow clinical trials and studies. I am excited. You kind of hinted at it, but the ability to kind of use digital twins to do testing and then, in a safe simulation so you can test new drugs and, the reactions. So you can kind of accelerate the drug testing process in a simulation and then get through the different clinical trials a little bit faster. So that is something that's super exciting. But yeah, I think, working hand in hand with regulators and making sure that we still protect patients' health. I mentioned there's a big thing going on with mental health right now with AI psychosis. This is going to be
Mm,
a key thing to look at, for your listeners. They kind of see how we kind of navigate this. Can OpenAI, who runs ChatGPT, which is the largest LLM out there, are they going to self-regulate and figure this out, right? Or will regulation have to really supersede and come in? And that's going to be telling to see because that's the first, I think, hint of how AI is affecting healthcare when it comes to mental health. So I think, as we see more of that, hand in hand shake between government and healthcare and how they're going to navigate new technology, we'll see how healthcare evolves with the use of AI.
mm. What a wonderful conversation, Theo. How can people get in touch with you?
Absolutely. Thank you for this time, Michael. They can reach out to my company, synsormed.com, SYNSORMED, or they can check out my podcast. I do once a week sessions on these technology and AI innovations in healthcare at The Real Theo Harvey.
Wonderful. Theo, thank you so much for your time and wisdom. It's been an honest pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you, Michael. Have a good night.